Your source for all things Texas Tech. This is the Ask Level podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome into another episode of the Ask Level podcast. Alongside Chris Level, I'm Chois Woodman. This podcast, as usual, brought to you by our friends at Cantex Roofing and Construction.
I'm Mike Hebert, owner of Cantex Roofing and Construction. Every day is game day, and we'll get it right when it comes to your roofing, construction, windows, and mirrors. Call Cantex Roofing and Construction today. Together, we are one serving you.
Level, good times end. Well, at least for now. Hopefully you start up some new good times. Red Raiders lose their first Big 12 basketball game out of 8. Snapping the 7 games streak, and you lose in quite the environment at Arizona against a really good basketball team. We've got several questions on that, a few football questions we'll get into, a little Super Bowl talk as well. But start there with basketball level. First off, how was the atmosphere? Looked pretty good on the television, and your thoughts on the game.
Yeah, and obviously I don't want to gloss over the fact that you beat Baylor, which I think is a big win for you, last week. Because again, I think there was I don't know, not necessarily like letdown, but I mean there's you don't want to give it right back with what you did in Houston a few days before, but you beat Baylor, and then you go. Because we looked at the 3-game stretch several weeks ago when you're at Houston, home versus Baylor, and at Arizona, and you're thinking, whew, that's about as tough of a stretch as you're going to get in this deal, because really nobody else is going to deal with the two teams at the top of the standings at their place within a week of each other, and that's what you just endured.
Yep.
And you went through that stretch 2-1, which is I think pretty darn good.
Yes.
And so you've ultimately split with Arizona, and you got, here's the thing, you got Arizona at a peak 10. They're hot.
Yeah.
This was on a Saturday, which it's harder to win on the road on Saturdays typically. You got them with revenge on the mind, because you'd beaten them by 16 about 3 weeks before. And you get a late, it wasn't like an early, you can't just slip in there and like it's a noon tip or whatever, and maybe it's a little sleepy. No, you got it at a peak 10, and you hung in there. And I think there's a lot to glean from how long you hung in there, and you kept, the score looks a little bit more lopsided than I think that the reality of it was, just because you had to foul some late, and Caleb Love got to pad his stats on some free throws and things like that. So I don't, there's no shame. Your net and your RPI are basically about the same as they were, based on you just playing Arizona at their place. But there were some things that I think, I don't give you some pause. I don't know if it gives you concern. You got tired, that some of your role players did not perform well, or just kind of non-existent, and I think that was a problem, and that's why you got to that point. And then I think that you leaned on some of your same pieces, and I think they just there was some, I don't want to say like you just were you looked a bit tired, and strained, and all that, and that's just part of being in this league. It kind of adds up. And I'm thankful that this week the game isn't until Wednesday, because I think a quick turnaround would have been potential trouble for you, like a Monday game or a Tuesday game. So you get a little bit of extra time. But I thought Christian Anderson had a brilliant performance.
He did.
One, Arizona's really good, and it was a great environment. I don't know if I don't think it's better than Lawrence, or it's not better than Ames, but it reminded me of like a Morgantown, which is sneaky tough when they're good. And I thought, and Arizona, I've gotten to kind of monitor this, like they're on the scene and just kind of from afar a bit, but Arizona takes their basketball pretty seriously.
Mhm.
Sometimes maybe they take themselves a bit too seriously. There's some arrogance there. I
There
don't know
definitely is. Yeah.
if that's deserved or not. I mean, four Final Four appearances and one title, and there's a lot of programs that have done more than that, but don't tell the Arizona fan that. But it is a welcomed, like what you got dropped into is exactly why people were so excited about that brand in
Yep.
that sport joining the Big 12. That was a big deal, and I do think, and I think Arizona is actually embracing and loving the Big 12. I think they because they're about to get dropped in the grease, this week when they go to Kansas State, who's just as hot
Yeah.
as Arizona is, and I think that there's a lot of sleepy, non-paying attention type atmospheres in the old Pac-12, and that's not what you get in the Big 12. And but Arizona's legit, and they kind of beat you up, and they were more physical. And as Grant said, the toughest team wins, and you weren't the tougher team
No,
on Saturday night.
it seemed like you were maybe lacking some juice, whatever that was, whether it's because of the late night tip or because of, a
Well,
gauntlet of a Big 12 you go through every night. You didn't seem like you played with the same juice that you did the previous Saturday against Houston for whatever reason. And like that being said, you're still right there. You're cutting it to 3 points inside of 4 minutes in this game, and you're still hanging right there, even though it didn't seem Tech definitely didn't have their best night. You got outshot by what, 15, 20, almost 20% in the game, and you're still hanging around in the final minutes. So I think you still show that you're a very good basketball team. Obviously, there's no panic for losing this game, but I think what you
yeah,
pointed. Go ahead.
as long as, and we'll fill in the rest of that
Right.
here in a minute, but there's a caveat to that. No panic, no. What you saw, though, I think that Arizona was clearly motivated, and I
Yes.
think when you have this is going to be a matchup problem to pay attention to when you start getting into NCAA tournament type stuff, or even when you whoever you see in the Big 12 tournament, multiple big men that
Mhm.
are active and play together caused Texas Tech a major problem. And Houston kind of can do that with you, but I think with Roberts and his twisted ankle,
Yeah.
they didn't really. And then Javar Francis kind of goes out of the game last week, so they weren't really ever able to play
Yeah.
both guys like with Tugler and all that, because that's what Houston is really good. But it was Vasar and Awaka that
Oh,
when they
okay.
were, I
Yep.
mean, they were just, that was a bit more than you could handle. And JT's doing everything he can, and
Yeah.
he
And
had no help.
and they were somewhat forced into that lineup too, because
A little bit with no Trey
Townsend
Townsend.
was not there, who's a little smaller, a little more of a four, and yeah, that it worked out for them, whether that was going to be the game plan all the way or not. But yeah, I think that's you've got to get, and this kind of leads into what you talked about. You got role players. You've got to get production out of role players like Federico,
And you
and
had, I mean,
Kevin Overton.
and this was so we're clear, this was a bit of an isolated incident
I
because,
agree.
I mean,
Yeah.
because Kerwin Walton, he's a starter and he did nothing in this game.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just go back to a week ago. I mean, he helped you beat Houston, and he
Sure
was
he
a
did.
big reason why.
Yep.
Overton's had some moments where he just really special off the bench, where he can add a lot of scoring punch and all that. But it just collectively, it wasn't a good night for that trio. I think they played like 28 minutes combined, and no
Mhm.
points, no rebounds, and a bunch of fouls. I mean, that was really all that they offered up, and you just needed more to beat Arizona on their floor in that environment,
Exactly.
and you didn't
Exactly.
get it. But
Yeah, if you're going to
I
win the big basketball games, you've got to get
yeah.
production from seven deep.
And that's the difference between home and the road in
Yeah,
most occasions in all sports is your role players typically play a lot better at home in
sure.
whatever sport it is than they do on the road. And and they decided to take Chance out of the game, or tried to, and he ended up with some numbers, but it just it wasn't enough. But
Yeah,
and sometimes you just got to tip your cap to the other guy. I mean, there's nothing wrong with just saying, hey, they're legit. It's not like we're screwed, or we're in trouble. Now, having said all that, what I was going to say was now, as long as, because now your schedule
Hmm.
opens up, and these
Yeah.
games are the ones that become really tricky
Yes.
because it's easy to be on high alert and you're going to get resume building opportunities, but then all of a sudden now it opens up and now you'll be semi heavy favorites to win the next 4 games in a row.
Exactly.
And anything short of playing Houston in about 2 weeks on a Monday night without a 4 game winning streak going into that game
Right.
is going to be a bit of a letdown, regardless of, and you've got a couple of road trips sandwiched in between 2 home games, and they're all going to be tricky for different reasons. And these teams are good enough to beat you if you show up and don't have it or whatever. But these are the ones that are going to be the tricky ones. But this is also when you need to start stacking. You,
Absolutely.
you don't need to give anything back. You need to keep, if you want any chance at the conference championship. It may require a 5 game winning streak here, unless
Hmm.
something really drastic happens with Arizona and Houston, and they start coming back to the pack. But they're a full 2 games ahead of you in the standings, and you're there's no tiebreaker scenario with Arizona because you split, and then with
Hmm.
Houston, I just don't know if you can theoretically do it without beating them twice based on the way that the math is going
Right.
to work, unless Houston helps you.
Yeah,
So.
and that's not expected. So,
Nope.
yeah, we'll get into those matchups just a little bit more. There's not a lot to break down there, but we will get into them in a moment. Let's get to a couple questions level. Let's start with this one. Josh asked, "What happened with the Coach McCasland technical foul?" I'll add, it did look pretty light on TV, but you never know what words are said or if there's a magic phrase. I also saw level before you answer it, and I don't know the complete validity to this, but Grant McCasland has supposedly had 5 technical fouls at Texas Tech.
This is coming from our radio broadcast.
Okay. So 3 of them have come from this
Yeah,
one official.
Darren George. Yeah,
Yes.
there's a okay. So yeah, he's had 5 technical fouls. I don't really count the 2
Against,
in
yeah,
Houston, the double
agreed.
deal. That was a one off.
Yeah.
But yeah, Grant got 2 technical fouls last year in separate games, both called by Darren George. Darren George called him for this one. There's a past history there. I thought Darren George was pretty level-headed most of the night, and they had some back and forth that was seemingly. But then at one point, I think Darren was like, "Grant, you and I are done. Like we're not done. We're done talking." And
So we got
Grant
a
was a
warning.
bit. He was a bit animated there. I do think that there was probably some regret there because you give him 2 free throws
Yeah.
and you're kind of right in it. And I would say that the technical fouls a lot of time these games are all so close
Uh-huh.
typically that there's some statistics out there that would tell you like technical fouls the team will lose more often than not. It's kind of like when you get a special teams touchdown and the
Yeah. Yeah.
odds heavily weighted in your favor. So that's just all. Those are all facts, and I don't. But yeah, Darren George. And I told Jeff Haxton that before when we saw the assignments. I'm like, oh, I hadn't, and I don't think we had seen Darren George all this season. And I will say that for the majority of the game, and I thought that game was actually called very fair, and I thought that they actually communicated, which was my whole complaint about the prior week. They actually were very transparent and communicated. I mean, there was a one point when I think Caleb Love was actually talking to Grant McCasland. It was happening right in front of me.
Yeah, I saw it.
And it was about a ball going out of bounds, and Caleb Love's like, "Coach, it wasn't out on me." It was just this back and forth. But Caleb Love kept talking. And Marcus Pettigrew came over there, and he got right in Caleb Love and said, "Don't talk to him like you don't talk to another coach." And he's like, "Hey man, we're cool. There's nothing bad going on here, whatever."
And then they high
And he's
fived, right?
well, and Marcus Pettigrew was like, told Caleb Love, he's like, "I don't care. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want you talking to another coach. Like, stop it."
Yeah.
And then Caleb Love was like, "Hey," he kind of high fived him or whatever. And I
Yeah.
think it was just an awkward existence, but Pettigrew was all over it, and I appreciated that because I think it's all about game management and how the control of the game you have, and not inserting yourself, but I thought they were transparent. I just, so anyway, that's all worth mentioning. So,
Yeah. It was a big tech, though, I think, because
mhm.
any glimmer of hope you still had in that game, it felt like it was sealed off after that technical foul. So,
Yeah, and Grant told me after the game, he said, I'm out here begging for calls, and he goes, that just doesn't work typically. So we didn't get into the
sure.
specifics of it or the guy who called it, but I just think it was kind of a last gasp effort, and maybe was there a foul or not? I mean, 50-50 and on the road, and he was just kind of like, was being very animated with it, and but yeah, that was I don't know if you were ultimately going to win that game, but that kind of, I don't want to say sealed your fate, but it became more of an uphill battle at
I
that
will
point.
say it's not a good look if there's one guy that's given you three technical fouls over time. And based off of, again, can't hear anything from where I'm sitting on my couch, but based off of what I mean, it was a very, very light technical compared to most you see based off of that. But uh, we digress. All right. How about this one level? This one, Brian's not too happy on based off this. Why is Texas Tech saddled with the perpetual curse of winning only until they are ranked and losing immediately after they actually are respected on the national stage? Talk him off the ledge, level.
Yeah, I mean, and I get that the PTSD of the Tech fan and
Mm-hmm.
everything. I think people need to be careful about just glossing over that Baylor win.
It was big. Yeah,
I think that
I agree.
the numbers and all that and again, there's no shame in it. Like I told you, your net and your Ken Palm and some of these other metrics that are used for all this stuff, it basically is essentially exactly the same as it was prior to the Arizona result. Now, would it have improved a bit if you'd win it? Sure, but it doesn't. This wasn't like, now, don't feel bad about dropping that one. I mean, yeah, did you want to win it? Sure. Is it going to make it tougher to win the actual conference? Yeah, it is. But don't, yeah, I just, now, if you go drop one of these that you shouldn't have, then I think that's when you're like, okay, that's
Right. I agree.
it's a bad loss or whatever. But I just don't look at it that way because I think a lot of times people come at their opinion there on the question being asked on you go pull off some massive upsets. It's like the old Spike Dykes days. You go lose to North Texas, but then you turn around 1 week and beat Texas A&M. That's not what this was. You lost against a legit, conference contender that is going to be in the top 15 at their place when their atmosphere was a 10 out of 10. And I just, yeah, I don't think there was some like, "Oh, I can't believe my guys did this to me." I don't get that sense at all in this particular instance.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. But like you said, if you don't take care of business this week, then that feeling feels completely warranted. And it's not easy. It's the Big 12. And we talked about Arizona State coming up on Wednesday night.
Mhm.
That's one you got to go win, obviously. But Oklahoma State's tricky. You have struggled in that building
So
against
so is
good,
so is TCU. I mean, the
sure,
next
sure.
two. I mean, these all are.
But you've struggled so much in Stillwater against bad teams, against empty
Mhm.
building. Does that one make you nervous on Saturday?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because the thing about these teams are, see, they can feel much better about their situations with a win over you,
Yeah.
and they're desperate, and you would love for them to quit or to kind of go in, hey man, let's just play it out. I just don't anticipate you getting that. Now, I will say that the two road games you have coming up in Stillwater and in Fort Worth, if there's Tech fans in the Metroplex, I mean, you can make a day trip out of going up to Stillwater. You can leave that morning and be home that night if you're somewhere in the Metroplex at all, and you will be able to get access into that building easily. Same with Fort Worth on I guess Tuesday night. You can really make yourself heard and be at these games if you really want to. And I think it would certainly help your team because they may need it. But yeah, those are going to be tricky. And now, having said that, I don't ever recall you just lost your very first true road game of the season.
Yeah.
and it was at a very tradition-rich program that had revenge on the mind, and it was as hot as anybody, and they beat you by 9, and it was, as you said, it was a 3-point game. So the immediate body of work would suggest you'll be able to figure it out, and Grant will have them with an edge and all these
Agreed.
things. But more fans in the stands would certainly, because you didn't have anybody hardly at Cincinnati or BYU or, but you have an opportunity to have a lot of folks there in Stillwater or in Fort Worth if they so
Sure.
choose,
Sure.
and you're not going to be blocked from buying tickets, I don't think, or anything like that. So. You would be able
Yeah,
to, yeah, if you got nothing going on Saturday, man, it'd be a perfect day trip because it's
for
depending on
sure.
what part of the Metroplex you're at, and you will be able to get access into that game for sure. But yeah, I hear you, man.
All right. Leah asks a couple of questions. This one says, "Is Chance McMillan okay? He got bumped on the noggin pretty good at the end of the game."
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I was a lot more concerned immediately, and he's kind of
Uh-huh.
shaking his head, and the referee's like going, "Hey, come over here. He's got something going on," and he got just hammered down on his head. A lot of times, precautionary, they just you automatically you go into protocol, or if you like, there's some sort of whatever. Seeing him after the game, he spent a lot of time talking with family and outside the bus when we are waiting to go. And there was, I guess, he had a lot of people there at the game, because he previously had played at Grand Canyon, which is up the road a ways. But I don't know. I didn't know anything about Kevin Overton. He went
Sure.
down in a heap. I guess it was versus TCU, and then I didn't.
Didn't
I'm on
realize.
the
Yeah.
trip and everything. You don't know anything about him, and then it's like you come out for warm-ups, and it's like okay, and he looked fine,
Yeah.
but it was like he was in protocol,
Yeah.
or had a head injury or whatever they released, and so whatever the issue. So I'm hopeful, but there's no guarantees here. So I really don't know. I'm just going off of what my eyes told me. So we'll just kind of have to
Sure.
sit back and see, and they'll do right by the kid, is what they'll do. But yeah, I sure hope he's available.
I do wonder if that wasn't 5 seconds left in the game too. Do they go take a look at that? Because well, it did not look intentional at all. But how many times do we see unintentional elbows
Well,
to the head
well,
area turn into
or in the
in the groin
groin.
or in the
Yeah,
groin?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Based off of last weekend's logic, Awaka would have got kicked out of the game. But that's a whole different thing. Um, Okay, one more from Leah that asks, are the Mahomes Gladiator uniforms, are there any for men's basketball? It seems like they're the only ones left out of the Mahomes NIL deal. What about the special Gladiator uniforms? Anything?
I think this is I don't think like as far as like the actual logo, I think that's only going to be football related.
There was talk of baseball at one point. I'm not
Yeah,
certain if
yeah,
that's
I don't think I think there's been some chatter about some of that or
okay.
even soccer. I
Yeah.
think that particular logo is reserved strictly for
Okay.
football.
Okay.
And I do think that eventually in 26, not this next season, but the season after, that may be like a permanent staple for the last, what, 8 years of the agreement that
Sure.
those are on every football uniform that you wear. Um, I don't know if it's in place of the Adidas logo or whatever, but yeah, I don't. And again, basketball has no complaints about their relationship with Adidas right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Seems to be going well.
yeah, it's fine. There's no yeah, so I don't think that's they weren't left out, if that makes
Right.
sense. They're
Right.
they're getting exactly what they need and want and all those kinds of things.
You alluded to Christian Anderson's play. I believe he had
Hmm.
17. Kelly asks, do you think Coach McCasland will try to build his team in the future around Christian Anderson? He's playing at an elite level as a freshman point guard. I don't remember ever seeing that in Lubbock.
Yeah, I mean, I don't one heck yeah. I mean, you're going to try to build,
Yeah,
but it's not totally around him. I mean, I think with him, yeah, being a major part of it. But you're going to need. It's going to be an interesting April for your roster.
sure.
Is that I mean, Elijah Hawkins and Darion Williams and Chance McMillan and JT Toppin. It's a lot a lot of production and a lot of scoring and a lot of rebounding, and just a lot of playmaking, a lot of experience, all of it to try to replace. And that's what they'll be tasked with. And you kind of look at it and go, okay, you'll have and Kerwin Walton too. But you'll have Federico, and then you'll have Christian Anderson, and then you'll have Mariella Kuntak. But then you're going to need to go portaling, and you're going to have to because I mean, I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, but obviously BYU as the number one player in the country, Kansas is as the second best player in the country, and is the highest rated player that Bill Self will have added. It's just not going to get any easier. And so Houston had one of the top recruiting classes in the country. They're going to graduate a bunch, but a guy that you wanted in Kingston Flemings, they also are adding a top big man to their roster. So you've got some heavy lifting to do and some decisions to make, and you're going to have to do it in short. And including trying to keep Christian Anderson back. I mean, there's no guarantees that, the way this stuff works, somebody go, hey man, what's it going to take for you to come play for me? That whole deal. So there's going to be a lot to decide here.
All right, let's shift over to football for a moment. As we got a couple of football questions floating out there, one running back related, one quarterback related. Let's start with the quarterback one. It says, Level, I saw that On3 ranked Sam Levitt as the top quarterback in the country. In your opinion, where does Behren Morton rank in the Big 12?
Yeah, and I don't know if I mean, I think that Levitt is good. I think he's got it. I think there's probably some room for him to get better. I'll be interested to see how good he is without Scattaboo behind him or next to him or as an option. They got the Army running back that I think was a really good add for them. I just think it'll be difficult for them to replace everything that Scattaboo brought them, just like it will be for Texas Tech with Tahj Brooks. I think Behrens certainly a top half of the league quarterback, and I think he would tell you, and everybody around it would tell you that position needs to be a bit better. Now, we have to mention how truly healthy was Behren because he had elective surgery. His offensive line play was mediocre to poor at times in front of him. There was I think that at some weeks you led the country in drops. Not Behrens' fault. I think there was plenty of times too where Behrens a bit inaccurate or misses the throw just a little bit or here and there that you just can't do it if you're trying to win at the highest level. But he's a top half of and again, it's hard to kind of judge him because we don't know what it's going to all look like on the after coming back from surgery, and everything like that. But I think he definitely is a top half of the league guy in my opinion. And people may think he should be higher. I think he gets the kind of respect that he should? Probably not. But I certainly understand the naysaying too. It bugs me when they don't give it any context about shoulder issue or offensive line play or the drops, things like that. I think that is lost on many that talk about it regionally and nationally, but that's hopefully that's why people are listening to us.
Yeah, I hope so. And I'm not even, back to the original question, I'm not even sure Levitt's the best quarterback. I mean, that's very arguable in this league, and they've got him as the top one in the country. So, I mean, it got clicks, and that's what its purpose is for. It gets you and I to talk about it. Okay, here's one more question from the Twitter. It says, this one is from Murray. Going to miss Brooks and his consistency. All around one of the better backs we've ever had. Tough-nosed and just reliable. Who is the next man up? Who is the guy that's going to fill in those shoes? Or is it guys?
Yeah, it's the latter. I definitely think that this was a unique circumstance. You may not see around here for a while, where it was you had a feature back that was as durable as he was, and you're purposely going into this deal going, he needs 20 to 25 carries at minimum in these games. I get the sense that Quentin Joyner is going to get first crack at being your starter or feature back. He's the transfer from USC. It's got a few years under his belt and got a lot of speed. And I think you've got Jacoby Williams and you've got Cameron Dickey obviously sitting there, but I think they're going to try to utilize Jacoby Williams a bit in the slot
Okay.
and kind of just manufacture some touches and include him but he's not somebody that is built to be a feature back, and I don't
Right.
know, Cam Dickey is, and he's great with blitz pickups and all those things, but he's had a hard time staying healthy.
Hmm.
But so the real answer is all of them will try to, and again, we don't necessarily know what your offense is going to look like either
Right.
and how this is going to be set up. But I would say if you're asking me who's going to get the most carries, I would probably lean to Quentin Joyner right now.
Okay. Um, but Jacoby Williams still kind of that home run guy that you would expect to just
Quentin Joyner can be that too.
sure, sure.
He's got legit speed.
But I'm saying Williams would be a guy that you're just going to try to, as you mentioned, manufacture touches, get him
Yeah.
his to try to get him opportunity, obviously.
Yeah, just trying to get him on the field. I think
Yeah.
that, you're with what you graduated at receiver. I think there's a bit of a need at slot that I think he
Okay.
can fill some of that void and where you can get, and then you can have fun with some of these play calls, but you can get, Williams and Joyner
Hmm.
or Williams and Dickey on the field at the same time. That's not in a two back set and do some different things with that. But I just think they want to get Jacoby a bit more involved. And again, it doesn't mean he has to play full-time slot. I just think it's kind of they may just kind of look at that and see what it looks like just to get him more snaps.
Something we haven't talked about a lot since the season has come to an end, and we've got a lot of time between now and football season. But how different does this offense look from Mac Leftwich to Zach Kittley? What kind of nuances are the biggest changes in your opinion?
I mean, it's a good question. I don't know if I think part of that is probably undecided, and even if you go through the spring and you go like, well, this is different, this is different. I mean, he has to see it. He has
Yeah,
to figure
yeah.
out what they're good at, what everybody can handle from a protection situation, from a quarterback, and that's why there's a bit of an unknown there because Behren won't go through spring. Um, I mean, I think that's a bit of an unknown. I think that he typically lines his wideouts a bit wider to the sideline. That's kind of a staple. It's more of a spread run
Hmm.
at times, but again, good coaches. I mean, what Kitley was doing last year wasn't necessarily what he was doing the year before,
Right, right.
and it certainly wasn't what he was doing at Western Kentucky. You just kind of you put it together based on your what your personnel is, and so that's why there's some unknown there. So I'm as curious as anybody to see.
Yeah.
And this will be a question that you could ask me going into August, but it's also a question that you could ask in mid to late September, and you may get different answers at each turn based
Yeah.
on how things are looking, what's working. Hey, we're not going to force this. It's what I like to do, but this is just not what all that stuff. But they will be fairly balanced, but they're not going to be all in on one aspect of throwing it or running it. He does like the vertical passing game, but so did Zach. And and again, you don't have a feature, back like Tahj. So I think there may be some differences there with the run game.
So one more thing before we cut you loose, Level. Kind of all the way back at the beginning of this past week, but we finally got a schedule for football. And Red Raiders, we learn where you're going to be playing. We've always known where and who you're going to be playing. We just haven't known the win of it. So anything that stood out to you in particular upon this schedule release?
Well, you're a couple things. Your bye weeks are somewhat evenly spaced out. I mean, I don't like the last one is so far toward the
Yeah.
end. I mean, that's is what it is there. You didn't play in any, or you're not set to play in any non-Saturday games, which I'm okay with. The only thing I was going to be okay with is if you go play a road one on a Thursday or Friday, you kind of embrace that.
Yeah.
But that wasn't dictated to you. I think the trickiest game, or you could argue that most important, maybe that first one at Utah, just
Okay.
because they're gonna be they're gonna be good. They're gonna be better than they were last year. They've got a new QB that ran for like 1,200 yards last year in Devin Dampier, and um, again, if you don't take care of that one, it kind of takes away from some of the ones you may be looking at down the road, and
Yeah.
it's just tricky because you're going to go on the road for your first two, and people will look at the Houston one and go, yeah, come on, you always beat Houston or whatever. But I mean, they got Kansas State in Houston last year. Willie Fritz is really good, and so we'll just kind of see. That's tricky. But the stretch that I guess I focused on was, I think it's October the 18th through November the 8th. Two home, two away, and there's three what I would perceive as title contenders in that stretch. I mean,
Yeah.
you get Kansas State, Arizona State, and BYU in that stretch, and then Oklahoma State is the one that is like, well, last year was a snapshot. Prior to that, they've been really, really salty for a long, long time, and so anyway, that little 4-game stretch that will ultimately decide whether you play in Arlington or not, in my opinion.
I think that's
And I
right.
like
Yeah.
no cold weather other than Morgantown on Thanksgiving weekend. So we'll see what that looks like. But
Well,
yeah,
at Kansas State on November 1 has potential, but
potential.
you never know.
But yeah,
It's not. Yeah, it's not late November, so that's a good thing. But yeah, I share most of the same thoughts on the schedule. Just happy to have one, and it's another chance to look forward to football season. But
That's
a
right.
very very awesome basketball season. You're right in the midst of, as you mentioned, got to keep it going. Two big ones this week. Everyone's big, obviously, but two, got to take care of business games this week. Arizona State on Wednesday, and then a road trip to Stillwater on Saturday. You'll hear Level on both of those calls. Chris?
Yeah, well, and
Okay.
and the good news is you're in the tournament. Like the wheels would
Solidly
really
in.
have to fall off. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
you could somewhat middle down the stretch, which would cause us some concern, but you're still going to make it
Sure.
to the NCAA tournament, and that's certainly solid. So anyway, Woodman, I certainly appreciate it. Cantex Roofing, thank you to those folks for being a part of this show and for watching, listening, however you consume this. So anyway, I guess we'll talk to everybody next time.
Absolutely. He's Chris Level. I'm Chois Woodman. You've been tuned into the Ask Level podcast, brought to you by Double T 97.3.
You've been listening to the Ask Level podcast, powered by Double T 97.3.